Coming to you live from Radio Cayman Studio.
For the record.
For the record. Hear from your government officials, independents, and the opposition on issues that matter to you. The record. Engage in an open dialogue between residents and lawmakers.
For the record.
The record. Informative, impartial, insightful.
This is your talk show.
1-800-534-8255. Your calls, your input. This is For the Record. And now, your host, Orit Connor.
Good morning and welcome to For the Record, where I am your host, Orit Connor. And my guest in the studio with me this morning, we have our usual panelists for Friday mornings, Mr. Steve McFeel and Mr. Christopher Saunders. I want to welcome you to For the Record. For the Record, a show produced by the management and staff of Radio Cayman, and it is geared specifically to keep you, our listening audience, abreast of issues as they arise and play out on the local, regional, and international scene. Of course, you are welcome to join me on For the Record to express your views, share your opinions, debate subjects, but usually you have a limited time to do that because we try to accommodate as many callers as possible. And of course, you can call us on our toll-free number, which is 1-800-534-8255. You can also call us on 949-8037 and 949-6990. Of course, if you don't like to talk on the telephone, then you can email us at fortherecord, one word, fortherecord at CANDW.KY. I want to remind you that For the Record is brought to you by LED Lighting Engineering and Design. They're located on Dorsey Drive in Industrial Park. They have many energy-saving items that will help you to reduce your energy bills. I also want to remind you, and we did have them on For the Record, that the month of May is Child Month. So we're celebrating Child Month for the month of May, and let's see what is on the calendar for the next few days. Tomorrow, there's the Circle of Love prayer breakfast from 8 until 11:30. That is tomorrow, the 16th, and then on the 17th, Sunday, there's the Family Fest 2015 at the Agriculture Pavilion, and I believe that is being hosted by the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And then, of course, on Monday the 18th, which is Discovery Day, the museum's children look here, and there's also a Family Fun Day, Brack Southside Public Beach in Cayman Brack. So don't forget Child Month and all of the activities that are taking place this week. Also, gentlemen, I want to say good morning to you both, and again, welcome to For the Record. Mr. McFeel, welcome to For the Record.
Good morning to you, OCs, and to Mr. For the Record. It's good to be back again with you.
And Chris, Mr. Saunders, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Morning, gentlemen, and it's great to be back. Missed you guys last Friday, but I just had to make that trip just to make sure, but everything worked out well.
Excellent. Yeah, that is good news as well. Of course, gentlemen, yes. Today is the big day, and what's happening today? Today is going to be the first meeting of the 2015-2016 session of the Legislative Assembly. So today we're going to have the throne speech. We're going to also have the budget address, and that will convene at 10 a.m. This morning. Of course, it will be carried live by Radio Cayman as well as government television as well. So we will have the throne speech, which will be delivered by Her Excellency Helen Kilpatrick, and then the Honorable Premier, Honorable Alden McLaughlin, will deliver the policy statement, and that policy statement will outline the policy priorities of government Then, of course, the fiscal year 2015-16 budget will be presented by the Minister of Finance and Economic Development, Honorable Marco Archer, as well. So we have a full slate. There will be a lot of pomp and ceremony this morning with the opening of the legislature as well. We'll have the police color guard as well. I don't know if any of you gentlemen are going to be able to attend, but certainly if you can't, then you may want to take the opportunity to listen, on the radio. We're not sure what's going to happen, but based on some of the headlines we see where that there's likely to be indication of substantial savings again, for the government. I believe we can possibly look at another reduction on the duties for CUC for the diesel, and I know Chris, you want to talk about fuel prices, today as well. We're likely to see cost of living allowance for civil servants. A few things I believe that are going to be announced, today. But at some point in time, and of course, this budget, this will be the last one that will need UK's approval if we become compliant with the FFR as well. So, extremely interesting, Mr. Macfield. Any comments?
Well, at what cost, though? At what cost to the people? That is the problem. You can be compliant with someone across the pond, but at what cost to you people? At cost of zero growth, no growth? Mm-hmm. At cost of people can't pay their bills? At cost of people can't have water to drink? At the cost of people can't pay their mortgage? At the cost of people sleeping in cars? At the cost of a prison that's overfull? I mean, at what cost? That that you can say, oh yes, they have now said that we don't have to come back to them to get our budget. But at what cost have we done it? Have we done that? You have to measure the cost.
Mm-hmm. And of course, Chris, there's this debate because you see, and that was one of the fundamental issues during the elections in the UK as well. Those who advocate for austerity measures to help to grow the economy, and there are others who say that you have to mix those austerity measures with some element of government pumping money into the economy as well. And of course, the ones who get hit the hardest by all of this are the people at the lower economic scale, the lower earners. Those persons who are on fixed budgets, they're the ones that are hit the most. Those who are reliant on the government for assistance, those are the ones that are hit. And we saw in the UK, for instance, where promises were made on both sides, and of course they used the fair tactic as well as to what one government would do over the other as far as additional cuts. Your comments, Chris?
The thing about it, OC, that people need to be mindful of is that the purpose of an economy is to raise the standard of living for everyone. When people speak about the economy, they speak as if though it is some magical place. It is actually made up of people, and as Steve rightfully said, is at what cost to the people XYZ is done. The thing about it is, and when you look at even the UK and different places, and you see it in Greece, where a government got swept into power basically saying, you know what, these kind of hardships can't continue. One of the things here in Cayman, and this has been my fundamental challenge, is that, first of all, no government around the world has yet to prove that taking a dollar out of the economy and putting it back in versus leaving it there in the first place has been more efficient. And when people talk about this welfare state and entitlement, you look at most studies that have actually been done. When you add up the amount of concessions that government give to big businesses and people, it's actually even more than they give to poor people. So when people talking about, oh, poor people getting this and poor people getting that, and when you put it in the full context of adding up every single thing across the board, concessions actually cost this country more than what it is that we do to help people. And what is wrong in terms of helping people? You know what I mean? But then the same people who get the concessions are the one complaining about what poor people have. And that has always been the hypocrisy of our system.
Yeah, and we speak about a free market economy, but we say that Cayman is a free market economy, and the problem is that, yeah, I believe in a free market economy. I live in a free market economy. I live in Canada for one of the top free market economies in the world, but they have resources, they have manufacturing, they have jobs, they have all kinds of things. They don't depend on a service industry to feed their country. Because in the service industry, only a certain number of people are going to have jobs, and even in whether it's tourism or financial service industry, and our people and our governments talk about helping people. You know, Orsi, it is one of the most asinine things that I've ever heard about the whole thing about, excuse me, about balancing your budget on the backs of poor people, balancing your budget on the backs of children who will never get a good education. And because from the beginning, from the time they went to preschool, they're hungry, and their brains are not developing properly. You know, that's what we have to think about. But people only think about a piece of paper and what somebody else think about them. We have to think about our own communities and our own people.
Of course, we had the announcement. I think there was a press conference this week where the whole issue of preschool was discussed, and it seems as if the government is now going to be pumping more money into that, and giving allowances for families who can't afford to put their children in preschool. But I believe that we have one caller online. I think Mr. McLean, Emily Ard McLean, has joined us on the phone. So let's hear from him. Mr. McLean, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, OC, and good morning to your guest, Steve. And
good morning. You down at the LA already?
Good morning.
No, man. I get there early, but I don't usually get there, so I'll be there by 9:30, I guess. I want to go back to one thing you said there in the beginning about not going to England for approval of our budget. I heard a soundbite recently, yesterday, I believe, on the TV or radio, where the Premier said that the days are numbered for us to go back to England to get approval for a budget.
Right.
You know, we need to stop playing politics in this country, you know, because if we read the Constitution on the assent of laws, it clearly states that the governor assent to those laws, and if it is not in the interest of England, she or he can refuse to assent and then send it back to us, give us 60 days, I think it is, to oppose that, right, to FCO. I wonder if we can explain what is the appropriation bill. The appropriation bill is a bill to be turned into a law for approval of the finances and the spending of this country. We have always had to get approval from England. The FFR was only the enactment of the restrictions we had placed on ourselves.
The conditions that we had to fulfill for a given period of time.
That's all FFR is, OC. It all it says is you impose these, now put it in law. So it has always come to cabinet. It has always been approved by England. Now, what England said was, you know, you have to stay within those guidelines.
Right.
Now, it may be based on what England did in the FFR. Yes, we cannot go over it and that kind of stuff. One of the first things, and Steve, I agree with you, at what cost? One of the first things this government should have done was gone to England and renegotiated the FFR and increased those restrictions in order that our people could eat, and put a sunset clause on it, maybe 5 years, 6 years or something, and bring it back to where we were and work on that, but at the same time try to feed our people. This country is having its finances look good on the backs of poor people, and that is going to hurt us. And the sooner we get to the realization that there are only a few people who is doing development in this country, and we're using that as our stock market, and in the meantime we are giving them concession at the expense of our people starving to death. We will hear more about that down at the LA in my budget address.
Okay,
Thank you.
just one question before you go, Mr. McLean. In relation to that, yes, but isn't there still time for the government to turn things around if they get their budget and the finances on sound footing? There is still sufficient time now to have the public reap those benefits, albeit that it may be later than it should have been, but some people will say better late than never.
And how would the people reap the benefits then?
Well, because now that that you're compliant with the FFR, then it gives you a little bit more flexibility in terms of what you can do. For instance, if the government today announces that there is going to be an additional reduction on the fuel to CUC, the duty to CUC, you're looking at probably, I believe there's a reduction somewhere. It's going to cost the government about $8 million to do that. So that's $8 million that they're giving up to ease the pressures on people.
Well. So you're telling me that you got some insider information? That
No, I'm just looking at my Samsung.
Well. I mean, the one problem with our system here is we don't get that in advance, and it's always a surprise for one-upmanship, I suspect, Steve. But I hope that's what they're going to do. But how much further do you know they're going to lower it down to 25 cents?
We're hoping that they'll do something.
Oh, you're hoping now?
Yeah.
Okay.
But
I appreciate that, OC. Thank you for the heads up. But yeah, this is what we need to do. But more importantly, what needs to happen is, and one of my proposals is going to be, OC, let's look at people who are retirees. People over 60 in this country. We need to mandate a law that they are given discounts, 10-20% discounts, or whatever the case may be. Do you understand what that will do for this economy? I mean, there are countries who are making a business out of that. People like countries like Panama, Florida, making a business out of it. So you get retirees spending more money and that kind of stuff. That is what will help people. It doesn't make sense. Maybe I will agree with increasing the retirement age to 65, but to what benefit? At 65, you're still going to be in an economy where you can't survive. And it is those people that are having difficulties in surviving in this country. The middle-aged and younger, they have problems too, but at least they may be able to get a job. There is a potential that they can get a job and live from hand to mouth, whatever the case may be. But it's the older people that we are killing at the expense of having the finances of this country in good standing.
Okay.
And I'm not saying that spend without any control. What I am saying is we need to measure it and bring it along slowly. And Chris, you can comment on that if you wish.
Yeah. Okay. Gotta go now though.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. We'll listen to you. We'll listen to you in LA.
All
Folks, I want to remind you that you're listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Stuart Connor. My guest in the studio with me this morning, Mr. A. Steve McPhail, prominent local attorney, Mr. Christopher Saunders, prominent local accountant and politician. And you just heard MLA Ard McLean, MLA representing the District of East End. Please stay tuned. We're going to go to commercial break. We will be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record, where I'm your host, Stuart Connor. My guests in studio with me this morning, Mr. Steve Macfield and Mr. Christopher Saunders. We have about 4 or 5 minutes before we go to our news. Gentlemen, I think Mr. Macfield, you want to mention a little bit more about the preschool, and Chris, you want to talk, a little bit more about what if they were to there would be a further reduction in the fuel duty due to CUC. Who wants to go first?
Actually, since on the back of Arden's call, because sometimes I do like listening to Arden, sometimes I do agree with him, sometimes I don't. But that's the nature of this business. Arden is right in terms of the issues that he's raising, and as Steve mentioned before, at what cost. The fuel issue has always been something that's kind of near and dear to me, for the simple fact that we live in a consumption-based society, and in order for our people or our economy to work, people need to at least have the ability to consume, and the only way people can consume is by having money inside their pockets. I have an issue with the government reducing the duty on fuel, for the simple fact that last time the government reduced the duty, they basically, I think, gave about maybe 4 million of the
I think it's got 8 million.
8 million of the people's money. But yet, the two companies that we have on Ireland at that time had sales, total revenues in excess of over $300 million a year. So we're willing to give up $8 million, but don't ask these companies to give up anything. And just to kind of put things in context for your listeners, OC, as of right now, last week when I was in Miami, I actually took a picture of the just as I was pulling up around the car, I took a picture of the gas pump just to kind of give you an idea in terms of, the difference of what they're doing here in Cayman. Right now, the bulk market, the bulk price for fuel, as of last week, was actually $1.84 US. Mm-hmm. Well, 183.5 thereabouts. There's a federal gas tax that goes on, which is about 18.5 cents. So between the bulk price and the federal price, you're talking about $2.02. They're basically selling it for $2.80. So they're basically looking at a margin of roughly 78 cents or 65 cents CI. Bearing in mind that these companies, on top of that, profitable companies, they also pay government taxes and everything else too. I take the same scenario in Cayman. You take $1.84 US starting point. You add 15 cents. Now, normally transportation or shipping cost is between 8 to 15 cents a gallon. I'm going to say 15 cents. So now you're talking about $1.99 US for gas. We add on the government duty of 90 cents. That's $2.89 CI. If I take the same margin that the guys in the US are making of 78 cents US, I'm at $3.67 US. I'm going to be nice again. I'm going to double the margin one more time. Another 78 cents. We're talking about $4.49 US. So in essence, gas in Cayman right now is supposed to be at $3.56 CI. We're basically paying $1 more, even though we're doubling the margin and we're giving these guys everything as it is. Mm-hmm. That is criminal. Pure and simple. Case in point, last week you could go to the Port Authority. You could buy diesel on the way out if you're leaving the Cayman Islands. Buy diesel duty free for about, I think it was $2.98. If you turn on and you
add CI.
Yeah, $2.98.
Imperial CI. Or
well, whatever it is that they sell at the port, I'm assuming it's the same. It's no different because we all buy from the same two suppliers anyway. That's duty free. I'm assuming the port ain't subsidizing boats leaving the Cayman Islands. So I'm assuming the port is at least making something on that. You add on the government duty of 75 cents. Since even though diesel is a little bit less, but so from $2.98 you add on the 75 cents of diesel. So you're looking at roughly $2 and $3.73 by the time you add on the duty. Yet look at what diesel is selling for at the pump again. Where these additional margins coming from? And this is where the government need to step in and start putting a ceiling. They need to regulate fuel in this country. These runaway type system can't work. It is unsustainable. And what people fail to realize, if people can't save for their retirement, they're going to turn to social services. And the burden that we are leaving on the future generations of this country is going to discourage the younger people, not only from getting involved in this economy, but some of them, when they go to school, they don't even want to come back. This is a land of opportunity. Right now, we've got 20,000 people on work permits who have either left their families or brought their families here. This is a land of opportunity, but yet Caymanians can't participate in that opportunity.
Folks, I want to remind you that you're listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Art Connor. My guests in the studio with me this morning, Mr. Steve Macfield and Mr. Christopher Saunders. We're going to go to a time check and then the news, and after the news, we'll be back immediately after that. So please don't change the dial. Lots to talk about when we come back.
Continues right now on Radio Cayman.
Good morning and welcome back to For the Record, where I am your host, Art Connor, and my guests in the studio with me this morning, we have Mr. Steve Macfield and Mr. Christopher Saunders. During my opening comments, we talked about the LA state opening and the budget today. And just want to remind the members of the public that you are invited to attend the state opening of the Legislative Assembly, and that the budget address will also be featured today. Those persons who are planning on attending should be seated in the visitors gallery of the Legislative Assembly by 9:30. The House will open with a proclamation summoning the new LA session at 9:40. Her Excellency, Governor Helen Kilpatrick, will receive and inspect a guard of honor outside before presenting the throne speech in the LA chambers. And of course, like I said earlier, this will be followed by strategic policy statement by the Premier, as well as the budget address by Finance Minister Honorable Marco Archer. Then, of course, the debates on the throne speech and the budget will be deferred until Wednesday, the 30th of May. So until next Wednesday, the debate will be deferred. But if you're planning on attending, please be there. You want to be seated by 9:30. And also, this notice doesn't say so, but please dress appropriately for the Legislative Assembly. Dress appropriately. Don't go in shorts and stuff like that. We know that there are times when tourists will come off the cruise ship and want to go and visit and stuff like that. I can't reach them at this stage, but those of you who are based locally, please dress appropriately to go into the LA. Now, Mr. Macfield, we're going to talk about early childhood education. You want to talk about that? And before we do that, I just want to say kudos and congratulations to Ms. Patricia Forbes, who has been appointed the new deputy principal of John Gray High School for the 2015-2016 calendar year. A local lady appointed deputy principal. Congratulations to Miss Patricia Forbes.
Congratulate her too. I think it's great that at least one person has been given a local position. At least they could find one person. Yeah, well, all right. First of all, let me thank Mr. McLean for calling in this morning and engaging us in the conversation, which he did.
Yes.
He's right. Of all that bunch, Mr. McLean was probably the one of the best ministers in government in Cayman. When he was there, he started solving the problem of the gridlock that had stopped the country from developing for generations, and he started opening up the country and causing road program and causing development in undeveloped areas. And since he's left, it's gone right back to where it was. I remember, and I was lucky to have been able to work for him as a director of the Roads Authority. I remember one day when we were not carrying out our mandate that he had given us, he came to us one day and he was in his usual flamboyant style, no direct style. He says, "Let me tell you guys one thing. If you can't do what I asked you to do, I will find somebody else to do it." And we asked him, he says, "Well, where are we going to find the money to do it?" He says, "Do you leave that to me? I'll have that for you next week." And sure enough, He had the money in our budget next week.
Yeah, I was going to say it wasn't necessarily smooth sailing for him in cabinet and everything because he had to fight to get the additional funds, and
Yes.
sometimes monies had to be moved
Yes.
from one ministry to the other for him to
Yes.
get the funds that he needed, for the roads as well. But before we start about early childhood, Mr. McField, we have a caller online, so let's take that caller now. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning to you, Mr. O.C.
Good morning, Mr. Hurlston. How are you?
That's fine, thank you, sir. Good morning, Mr. McPhee.
Good morning, sir. Good morning.
And to Mr. Saunders. It's always
Good morning,
so
Mr.
very good
H.
to hear those two gentlemen on the radio.
Certainly is.
Wealth of knowledge. You don't have to worry about any tourists this morning, but of course there are no cruise ships in, I don't think so. And but it's a good thing for them to see our what I call pomp and pageantry type of government, just like England with the royal family draws a lot of tourists. The changing of the guard and the ceremonial aspect of the system, British system. And a lot of people think that Her Majesty the Queen runs England, and because I deal with tourists every day, many of them. And many do know that that's not the case at all. Anyway, we swear allegiance to her, though, so I don't know what would happen if I'm not as a British politician or the Prime Minister. I just don't know what would happen if they held a referendum and did away with the royal monarchy part of it, and then we would be no longer have any allegiance to up there. I don't know, I guess we'd have to go about swearing allegiance to the British Prime Minister. Or at the time, Mr. McPhee, I know you know much more about that about me than me, what would happen in a case like that. I have no idea. Gentlemen, you're talking earlier on about like the FFR and all that we have in place and the limits on it. I think it was Mr. McLean that called in. And
Mr. McLean, yes.
yes, I wonder, I just asked this, I guess, before I say what I have to say. Does Bermuda, which is a similar economy and similar sort of structure to us, the most similar, does Bermuda have an FFR in place?
No, they don't. They don't require any approval of their budget from the UK. As a matter of fact, Bermuda now has a national debt of somewhere about $2 billion US.
Yeah.
But they don't follow. Remember now what the UK said about Bermuda, that their constitution was a pre-independence constitution. So they did give them, the leeway. And of course, when you look at when that constitution was put in place, and you look at the people who were in power in Bermuda, when that constitution was in place, black people in Bermuda didn't have the right to vote.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Some people could vote twice too, depends on your location.
Yes.
If you own land.
Yep.
So we're saying that the constitution that they have then shouldn't be. Or isn't it to their benefit to not have to go to England to ask them to approve their, because they must be doing something right, because Bermuda has the highest average salary of any country in this whole entire planet.
But their economy is on the decline now. They've lost a lot of international business in Bermuda. They are struggling. They're struggling. They're struggling to get their tourism sector back in order. Mr. Hudson, I think this whole the whole issue of constraints and financial constraints can act, as a two-way sword, or a two-edged sword to a certain extent. When you look, for instance, despite what occurred in the Turks and Caicos, some people will look at the Turks and Caicos and say being brought under administration at least got their finances back on a sound footing, and they're doing much better than they are now. Some people will look at the Cayman Islands and maybe, with hindsight, will say it was good that we had the FFR, because yes, we had to tighten our belts, and some people suffered, from it. But if at the end of the day, there is overall good and benefit for everyone, then in hindsight we may say it was good.
It doesn't seem that way with us, though, because the people who suffer, people who are earning $200,000 a year, and it doesn't matter to them. They're not going to suffer. The people who are suffering are the little men, the little people.
And that's why we have to see when we get those surpluses, we have to ensure now that translate into something for the little man, the person who's out there, trying to make ends meet every day.
I just wondered something. Just like to pass this on to you all. 45 years ago, to be precise, a gallon of gasoline was 35 cents. People earning $2 an hour could buy over 5 gallons of gas with 1 hour's pay. Now there are people earning $10 an hour. There are lots earning $4 an hour. That the $4 an hour person can't buy a gallon of gas, and the $10 an hour can't buy just two gallons. A pack of cigarettes was 18 cents, 20 cents, because I sold cigarettes to my cousins in Boston at the time. 18 cents. Now those who smoke, I gave it up 36 years gone. They were way ahead of what it is now. I think it's probably about $10 a pack or somewhere near there. Just showing you all the value of our money to the little man now who is really suffering here, who is really a 55-gallon barrel of kerosene oil was $9.70. Let's put it at 44 imperial gallons. And yes, the bunkers that you buy for when you're going off of here, it's in U.S. gallons. I'm pretty sure it's not in imperial gallons. That is buying in duty-free fuel. It just goes to show you that the little man here has decreased his money, his earnings, everything, to the level where he'll have nothing. The majority of the small will have nothing at all. They'll have to be totally dependent on government, take care of them health-wise. Mandatory health insurance, that's worthless, totally worthless, but it's put in place by our MLAs. And a mandatory forced savings called a pension put in place by our MLAs. Again, they'll have to live on a government where there's no direct income tax. No direct income tax. Gentlemen, have an excellent day.
Thank you, Mr. Hurlston. Thank you, Mr. Hurlston. Just for the benefit of our listening audience, when we look at the FFR, Framework for Financial Responsibility, it was developed on the basis of 4 fundamental tenets. Or 4 principles, right? Those principles were: 1, government should undertake effective medium-term planning to ensure that the full impact of fiscal decisions is understood. They must understand what the impact of their decisions are. 2, government should put value for money considerations at the heart of the decision-making process. So you run government like a business. 3, government should demonstrate effective management of risk. And 4, government should drive the delivery of improved accountability in all public sector operations. All having to do, all of those principles had to do with effectiveness, with accountability, but no one talked about, Mr. Markfield, the human factor. No one has spoken about the human concerns. None of those things have spoken about the human concerns.
No, because we've forgotten them. We've forgotten the human concerns. Because it seems to me now that the concerns is about corporations and money and how it moves and how it doesn't move. That is the concern. The human concern is on the by the way. And beyond, the only time that they concern with human beings is when it comes to the next election, when the human beings have to put the X to give them the power. But let me go back to what you said about the preschool. Well, I'm happy that the minister has made a declaration such as she made. It's a small step in the right direction. But I noticed you say eligible children.
Yeah.
eligible
those who
children,
are eligible,
those who
yep.
are eligible will get report. But let me tell you what my opinion is. Every child, every Caymanian child should have a free preschool education. Every Caymanian child should have free preschool education. And not only that, they should have breakfast, they should have food, and they should have a nutritionist at the school to make sure that when the money hits to the school, that the money is spent on the nourishment of the children. They should have a nutritionist at the school like they have in the hospital.
And you know something? No one that I know would complain, if the government decided to do that.
Exactly.
No one would
Exactly.
say, it shouldn't be
Exactly.
done. And I believe that those persons who can afford it, those who are in the $250,000, $300,000 bracket,
Yes.
They would either send their children to a private one where they can
Exactly,
pay,
exactly.
or they will say, listen, let me contribute something to
Yes,
government
yes,
because the
yes,
government is
yes.
doing it.
And another thing, every preschool should at least have some older people in the environment so that we can continue the old grandfather environment. So all the grandmothers, sub-grandmothers who are unemployed, they should employ them in the preschool to sort of keep the environment with the children, so the children
Family,
can,
yes.
so the family, and they can pass on the
culture.
the culture to the children. That's what I would do. Canada does it. I know that Canada is a high tax country, and they have lots of resources, but they even pay women to have children because they need to increase their population.
yeah.
And they think that it's better to increase the population from inside than to increase from outside.
Yep.
And that brings me to the point that you made during the break. What about our Cayman diaspora? If we are going to try to increase our population to 100,000 people, why don't we go around and put ads in the paper?
Bring the
To
Caymanians
where the
back home.
Caymanians are.
Invite them.
Invite them back. They should get the benefit.
Exactly.
Because they went from here when there was nothing.
And offer
seek
perks
and
to
offer
for them
perks
to come back.
Why didn't they do that? Decrease in population to
Yep.
make sure.
We got to go to a break now. We have one caller online. We're going to ask that caller if they could remain extremely patient. We're going to go to a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to go directly to you, caller. So please stay tuned. We'll be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record, where I'm your host, Howard Connor. My guests in the studio with me this morning, Mr. Steve Macfield and Mr. Christopher Saunders. We have one caller online, and I promise we'll go straight to that caller, so I'm going to keep my promise. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, OC, and good morning, Steve. And
Good morning,
Mr.
Rupert. How are you? Haven't heard from you for a while.
Well, I got a couple of I got some work I'm doing, so I got to concentrate on that right now.
Oh, yeah. That's important. That's important.
Good to hear you guys. I always enjoy your program when you got these two on because they always got a lot of good things to talk about and important stuff.
Oh, yeah. There's some of my best stars on, on For the Record.
Stars. But anyway, I there's a couple of things I wanted to touch base on or talk about this morning, and in terms of our priorities and stuff like that, and what things we should be doing and we're not doing. I don't know why, but I was taking the other day, I think it was on Monday's paper, they had an article in there about the number of teenagers between 15 and 19. I think 1 in 5 was the what it said, that were either molested or raped or something. And I guess they was mainly talking about, I don't know if that was boys and girls, but I think probably mainly girls and stuff. And gentlemen, something that I've observed over the last probably 3-4 decades, that parents don't seem to pay attention to the children anymore. Everybody's got a car. Some of these young girls, and they got a car and they drive off when they want to have a date. Parents don't even know who they're dating. This is a friend from school or whatever. And I don't think parents are taking enough responsibility to get out there. I got a son he's 18, he's gone to college now. But when he was at that age, I would talk to him and tell him about tell him things that he should know, and about who to associate with and who to watch for and that kind of thing. And it hurt me to think that when you think 1 out of 5, that's like 20 out of every 100 people who got on the side, young girls, young people, between 15 and 19. And I'm saying, why isn't it that when that we have parents? I mean, I hear some things. You see, decadence is rampant in Cayman. People, it's all about, what it's about. It's about me. It's about me. That's the attitude people take. Some of these parents, and they let them out. They go about their business. When we were growing up, you guys remember how if your sister who was 17, 18 years old had a date and she was going out, she had to have an escort with her. I would have to do that for my sisters. And these are the things that I think we're lacking these days. And now the children get pregnant, they come home, and then they hear them talk about, in this article, they were talking about the number of suicides. And I think what has happened to us, gentlemen, is that we have sort of forgotten about the ways we were brought up. Like Steve was talking about, getting old people in there and talk, and they will tell these kids some things that the parents ain't telling them, and what to watch for. Because when we were growing up, we never hear all this stuff. I mean, and this is what hurts me about our island, a beautiful island. We have lost all of those wonderful qualities we had back in the day, and it hurts me to see it happening today. But I'll just say one more thing, and then I'll let you guys comment. But the other thing is that I thought about it too. We got people in prison. They get a record. They go to commit a crime. They go to prison, and they come back out. They can't get a job because they got a record. You see, and they go in there and they're costing us something, gentlemen, like according to the records, $60-something thousand a year to put one prisoner in the Northwood. And what are we getting for that? We get a prisoner coming out of there that can't get a job. He goes back in circulation, and then because he can't work, guess what he's going to do? He's going to be back in Northwood before too long. And I'm saying, isn't there some way that $60,000, if that's what it is, that
68, I think it is. More than 60, Mr. Rupert. It's more than 60. It's
more than 60.
It's probably 65 or 68,000. But
Okay.
but not only that. It's $150,000 a year to keep a child in Bonaventure, to keep a boy in one of the boys' home.
Oh,
$150,000 a year. That's even more costly.
I didn't know that.
Yes, and usually by that time the child goes there, it's too late. So you pay $150,000 for him in the Bonaventure, one of those places, and then he doesn't get rehabilitated there, and then he goes up to the other place where they cost him $68,000 then to keep him. So you figure that. And you see where some of the money is going.
Yep. Caller,
Well,
I'm going to
I
ask
was
you if you
saying,
could leave us there. We have a couple more callers online,
man.
so we're going to
Okay,
grab this.
okay.
But nice to hear from you again.
Okay, my brother.
Next caller, please. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Hi, good morning, Mr. O.C.
Good morning, Miss Lucille. How are you?
And Mr. Steve
Good
and
morning, ma'am.
Mr. Saunders.
Morning, dear.
I couldn't help. I was going down to the LA and I couldn't help but listen to you talk, especially Steve, talk about preschool and say everything should be free. But I want to carry Steve back to about 15, 20 years ago when all government schools had a reception program. That is, they took it the year that you would have been 4, you went to school. Sometimes they took it in twice a year. Now, some learned person or some person of entrepreneurship decided that was not a good idea because children didn't do well at 3 and so we had an influx then of private ventures. And I need not say anymore. So we changed that in government, and then we took the reception programs out of the schools.
No, but some of the schools, still
Cayman, Bracken, different places that kept
there
it.
are, I think, when I listened to the press conference, Miss Lucille, that they mentioned that there are 9 government schools that still have reception classes in them.
They should have made a comment on that just came in. I don't think it's 4 years ago. Because this is why, we have to understand the reason for a preschool. And I'm telling you, I was there. And some of the teachers fought hard against it. And of course, some of the private sector fought hard against it because it meant that they were starting preschools, and of course, it would lessen the financial benefit. Now, these are things, this is when I think you have to have martyrs in politics, because you have to put your foot down and say, listen, this is for the benefit of the same children, people you talk about, the little people, which the same people that are disenfranchised, the same people that are of low income, they get an equal footing with everybody else by going to a preschool, which is free. And I agree with Steve that the preschool, primary, and secondary school in the public system must be free. I'm not going any further than that, because if we do well at that level, I think that then the parents who can help and with some scholarships should be able to contribute then to the other sector of their children's education.
Thank you,
and the
Ms.
second part
Lucy.
I agree with Steve is that you must have the intergenerational relationship. Steve and I grew up in that
Right, ma'am.
situation. We grew up in that environment, the village raising the child. And unless we go back to that, dog eat our supper. That's all I wanted to say, and you all are doing a good job. I'm not hearing my friend Mr. Saunders this morning, but I guess when it comes to the economics of things, he will open his mouth.
Yeah, you'll hear him soon. We'll soon be back on track.
Actually, Miss Lucy, I just want to make one comment where I totally agree, and I'll tell you why. One of the things I've actually done in terms of political science is study the other Caribbean countries. And I remember once coming across an article where when Siaga was demitting office in Jamaica, he gave a speech in Parliament in which he basically said that the political leadership had failed Jamaica since independence. And he said one of the things when you look at the people who had put Jamaica on the map, it wasn't the people who the government invested in. It were basically the people that the government rejected. And he said the one thing I remember taking away from the article, he said, successive government post-independence has spent millions of dollars in primary education, hundreds of millions of dollars in secondary education, and billions of dollars in tertiary education. And where they fell down was they did not invest in basic education the first 7 years of a child life. He said that is when it would have made the most impact, and it would have cost us the way less problems within the country. When you sit down and you can learn from other people's mistakes, this is what this business is about. And you look at the districts like Cayman and Brack, from what I understand, I kept the reception classes, and look at their pass rates for their students coming out of high school and everything else. You can actually directly see the impact. At least they had enough sense to not make some of the mistakes that we made in Grand Cayman. And again, so going back to what you just raised and what Steve just raised, and as you had mentioned about the advice, some of the best advice I got was actually from my grandmother, Miss Mack from Champion House, the late Miss Mack. And for a woman who never went to school as much, never educated, I mean, here I am going through college and everything else. Some of the best advice I got actually came from Miss Mack. And so that generational advice is actually very important.
I say that common sense was made before book sense, and that is what we forget too. But I want to leave something with you that I keep abreast of education. I do a lot of research on it. But I want to look at some of the leading education countries in the world. Singapore is one of them. You know that Singapore has increased not just the days the child go to school, but the length of time he stays in school. We only have 190 days. That is minimum as far as I'm concerned. And then we have about 5 calendar days. I was there as the one who made that schedule, and it still works. But we need to look again to look, and particularly those that are failing. Should we not keep them in a little longer during the summer, or have different provisions for them? Not just a plaything, but structured work for them in math and science and reading and writing. Should we not do that at the summertime and say, look, we can give you 2 weeks off, but I'm sorry you didn't do well in your school exams, so we have to bring you up so that next term when you get back,
classes,
you will be equal to your people.
Yep.
And education, as you know, is very, very dear to my heart. And Cayman Islands is a knowledge-based economy.
Yeah.
And unless we are prepared to spend all the money on our young people and our children and our adults too, to retool them for this global world that we live in, and this knowledge-based economy that we have developed. But our education system must go alongside with it. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Miss
thank you,
Lucille,
Miss
Miss Lucille,
Lucille.
before you go. Miss Lucille, before you go. Yeah, are you still there?
Yes, I'm here.
Well, I really want to thank you for the contribution you made today. I just want to say to you that if we are able to start from that level, to build our community and our society from that level, to build it up from the preschool, then we're not going to have much problem when it comes to adulthood later. What it's going to do is going to reduce prison guards. It's going to reduce the number of people in Northwood Prison. It's going to reduce. It's going to reduce the people at Bonaventure. We are not going to have to looking around to be building courtrooms, and we have 7 courtrooms already, 11 grand court judges and magistrates. It's going to save us a lot of money, and most of all, it's going to build a strong nation, nation of people that are positive and that can hold their own against anyone who comes in or where they go in the world.
Okay. We've got to go to a break now, Miss Lucille. Thank you very much for that. Thanks a lot. Folks, I want to remind you, you're listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Dorrit Connor. We're going to go to a commercial break at this point in time. I believe we have one more caller on hold. We're going to ask that caller to be patient. This break is going to be for about 1.5 minutes, and we'll be with you. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record, where I'm your host, Dorrit Connor, and my guest in the studio with me this morning, we have Mr. Steve McPhail and Mr. Christopher Saunders. 2 callers online. Grab the first caller. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm just fine, thanks. Want to congratulate Mr. McPhail and Miss Lucille on their contribution to this preschool matter.
Okay.
I'll give you an experience. I went to a preschool to drop off my great-grandson. I'm a 66-year-old great-grandmother. And I saw a little boy. He was been sitting in the corner behind the door, breaking his little heart, crying. So I said to one of the attendants, I said, aren't you going to pay a little more attention to him? In a nice way, because the child was sobbing and crying, not just screaming, just sobbing his heart out. So she said, oh no, the more attention you pay to him, the more he's going to cry. I said, no, that it doesn't work like that. So I turned around with my little great-grandson, and the 2 of us started talking to the baby and, getting him out of that crying mood. And he's responded to us. And I started counting little animals that was on the door next to him, and he started to get interested. Now that's a prime example of what is happening to our young people across the board, in preschool, in primary, in secondary, wherever they go. The ones that need the most attention get released. And experience is the greatest education you can have. And until we set precedent that children must be educated from the first 3 years of their lives, that's proved to be their major learning years. Until you can ground them into that and start from, you've got to train up a plant from it's young. You can't go and introduce things they should have learned at preschool age when they're in middle school. And as a part of grandmothers being integrated into these preschools, I see that I had that idea long ago, and I said that would be the greatest thing that could happen to our preschools. And one of the criteria for a preschool attendant should be you must have been a mother to go and instead of having a piece of paper to say, I know how to teach. Yeah, if you're a mother and that in addition, great. But once you're a
If you can
mother,
wrap it up for us, caller, we have another caller online and we want to go to the 9 o'clock break.
preschool is the foundation of our country.
Thank you very much.
thank you,
Thank you very much. One more caller. I think the devil is visiting us this morning, so let's hear what the devil has to say. Good morning, Mr. Farrington. How are you? Haven't seen you in a while.
Yeah, I'm doing all right. Good morning to you, Mr. O'Shea, Mr. Steve, and Mr. Christopher.
Good morning, sir.
Morning, sir.
I got the chance listening the last time about education.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's time for us to get back to our roots, where we really came from. For seamen, they put us down completely and started something else. And our children do not have a chance to get back to where we was one time. We started a marine training school, and that was scrapped. I don't want to name it who was in charge of it. I mean, Captain Colbert Jackson was teaching navigation. Mr. Solomon was teaching, Captain Solomon was teaching navigation. Mr. Leroy Frederick, Mr. Joe was teaching engineering. So if they had built on that, we would have had a marine training school here now, a proper one, because they got one in Jamaica that's sponsored by Norway and London.
Yeah, Mr. McPhail has spoken about that, yes.
Yeah, so when I get to I can make Mr. McPhail elaborate on his vice president of the Seafarers Association now. So we intend to get some of our children up there and graduate for that and get on those ships, because it's still got millions of people sailing those ships. And you can't jump on it like how you jump on and be trained after we get there. They got to be trained before we go there. So we've been let down by some of our legislators, and we got to try to bring this back. We, instead of send them northward, we can send them on those ships. It costs too much. I just come back from West Virginia, and I see the prisoners on the road, walking on the road. It costs government a lot of money to keep them there, but at least they're getting some work from them. So why can we do something similar to that here? We cannot continue to build prisons and hire judges and build more courtrooms and everything else. We got to do something constructed now to help our young people, and that criminal offense for trying a little stick of ganja, that were more people trying it those days than weren't trying it, but they could get back to the United States. So it's all of that we got to look at. So Mr. McPhail, I want you to elaborate on that and tell them some of the plans that we got to get some of our children back on those ships.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ivan. For about 2 minutes, Mr. McPhail, if you can, let's talk about, Mr. Ivan mentioned hard labor, and I see in Jamaica where sentences are imposed and with hard labor.
That's right.
We don't see that in the Cayman Islands anymore. Why is that?
Because we say that's a cruel, unusual punishment. That's what we said. But in Jamaica, it's still hard labor. Their law has not changed from the old Elizabethan sentencing system. That's what.
And of course, our Bill of Rights now would make it even more difficult to do that. Yeah.
Exactly. So let me go back. Well, the Caribbean Marine Institute, like he says, set up by Norway and London, Lloyd's, and they train people because there are something like 85,000 vacancies just for officers on board ships around the world.
Wow.
85,000 vacancies for officers on ships around the world. The academy over in Jamaica has over 900 boys and girls from all over the world. They train them in every aspects of seafaring, even some things outside of seafaring. They train them in the new things now, like how to set up solar panel systems, and you can get a diploma, you can get a degree, and stuff. They train you from a captain to a deckhand, and from a chief engineer to a wiper. and you get a diploma, and for all of the ships that carry liquid cargo and stuff, they even got courses in cruise ship management, and courses in harbor management and piloting.
Wow.
So and they guarantee, and they say that their record is such that 9 out of every 10 students has a job before
Placement,
they graduate.
so they give you placement as well.
Before they graduate. We are going over there to look at it and to see if we can make a deal with them to have some of our students who are wasting their youth over in here. If they could take them over there and train them and put them in that category where they can get a job and they can become productive people. That's what the President Devil and I are going to do very soon.
Excellent. Susan, you ready for us now, folks? We want to remind you that you're listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Stuart Connor. My guests in the studio with me this morning, Mr. Steve Macfield and Mr. Christopher Saunders. We're going to go to headline news, and after headline news, we'll be back with you. So please stay tuned, as we will be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record, where I'm your host, Stuart Connor. My guests in the studio with me this morning, Mr. Steve Macfield and Mr. Christopher Saunders. We have no calls online at the moment, so gentlemen, I want to give you all an opportunity, because every time you're on here, I invite you on here, and I say, prepare stuff that you want to talk about, and most of the times we never ever get to the stuff that you guys want to talk about. So let's see how much time we can give you this morning to put your agendas forward.
Well,
who wants to start?
Actually, I'll start. And I want to thank Nikki, Mr. H, for calling in earlier and raising the issue about Bermuda. Back in 2013, the Bermuda government commissioned a SAGE report, which basically looked at the future of Bermuda and everything else. And I want to just read a little excerpt from page 14 of that report that says, like many other countries, Bermuda is struggling to address the impact that an aging population is having on the social insurance scheme. The pay-as-you-go model has been dismantled by demographic shifts. The island's challenge is compounded by a declining workforce and a declining birth rate. Pension schemes for government employees and parliamentarians are close to $1 billion underfunded. Government cannot make that amount up in the foreseeable future. In addition, the contributor pension scheme on which Bermudans rely for retirement income was $2 billion underfunded as of August 1st, 2011. Earlier, OC had mentioned about Bermuda's public debt of around $2 billion and everything else. And when you look at, and what they had also was a graph showing the number of Bermudans 15 years and under, and the number of Bermudians 65 years and under. And pretty much by about 2015, this year, it is about 50-50 in terms of those 15 years and on and those 65 and above. But then after that, it continues where they have a declining birth rate in the sense of more people are being retired than basically people that are being born. And going back to Steve's point earlier, where he had mentioned about in some countries where you're literally encouraging people to basically go and have more children. In economics, they talk about the dependency ratio in the sense of how many Caymanians it is that you have that today that will be able to take care of future Caymanians and everything else. And this is a problem that we're also going to have. So when we go back and we look at things, I mean, it's very simple when people are living paycheck to paycheck, which is very unfortunate. We do need people that is looking 5, 10, 15, 20 years in the future. And that is where we are falling down. We need to go in and get our own SAGE report and have a serious look at the Cayman economy and in terms of what it is that we're planning for our children. Me, I like to think for the future because that's where I intend to live. I have no intention of living in the past. Unfortunately for some people, they always get stuck in the sense of always going back. It's good to go back to learn from it, but you have to go forward and do something with it. And I think from that standpoint, for me, why it is important and near and dear to me in the sense of we need to invest in our people. I mean, it's literally a sin that we're, as Miss Lucy would call in and said, we're living in a knowledge-based economy, but we don't want to make knowledge available for our people. And what's even more of a criminal side of it is that we make it so easier now for our people to compete with people from other countries coming here who coming from countries that basically invest that kind of knowledge with them. Mm-hmm. So we're not giving it to our people, but then we're making it more difficult for people because they're competing from people for jobs from the United States, Canada, the UK, and those people are coming from countries where they actually invest in them. So it's kind of a bit of a disadvantage. And the second issue, which is also near and dear to me, is our inability to leave people money in their pocket. If people cannot plan for their own retirement and save for their own retirement, they will turn around and they will be asking the government for help in the future, which means that it'll be more expenses for government, higher taxes for the people because the government has to raise the money, and we're basically leaving this burden for our children. So when we start looking at that overall, this is not a good picture. So when you hear people talk about the economy is in a sweet spot and all that kind of stuff, I'm like, what economy are you living in? I mean, people right now are still struggling. They can't pay their light bill. Some houses without water. There's some houses in Barton Town that to this day still have no light, that elderly folks are living in. I mean, it is almost criminal. But yet, we want to brag about having this surplus and that surplus and everything else when we have basically bankrupt the country. I mean, it's almost like we're suffering from a certain amount of moral bankruptcy. But we need to invest in our people, and we need to start bringing the cost of living down. Government, whether they like it or not, has got to start regulating fuel. They've got to start putting in ceiling on prices. Kudos to Mr. McLean, Gilbert McLean, when he was there the last time. He basically sat down there and put a kind of ceiling on health insurance costs. We need the same thing for basic food items for people too. And the government need to kind of, have the testicular fortitude to do so.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. McField.
I would like to address the proposed motion. I understand is going to be brought by the Councillor Connolly, where he wants to stop people from giving the people helping the people. Well,
Politicians from giving
politicians.
yes,
That's the most asinine thing that I ever heard before, because the elections law has all kinds of provisions for offenses, to control politicians from giving people things and helping people. And I have not heard any of those provisions being enacted into criminal offenses yet in the Cayman Islands. So why are we going to pass more motion to get more law to do something that really is not prevalent, that we've not used for use, and to say that politicians should not help their constituents, and especially when they are poor. Mr. Oriot, there's an old saying that folly laughs at itself, but folly laughs at other people, but wisdom laughs at itself. That's an old saying, because that's what to do that. That's what it means. Laughing at would be laughing at people's plight, laughing at people's fate to be poor, and preventing people from helping them. I have never heard that in any other country before, and that really bothers me because that's dangerous. And secondly, he said he wants to limit the term limits of the people, the electors in the legislative assembly. Well, all right, I do not know of any country in the world where the term limit for an elected person is limited. Surely, the term limits for people who are appointed to offices are controlled. For instance, our premier can only stay in office for 2 years, but that doesn't limit his election by the people. So you want to tell me now that you want to curb people's choice? The people's choice to elect someone who's been serving them and who is willing to serve them? That I don't want to call the word for it on this radio, but that reminds me of some place where people were sent to work camps for that sort of stuff. But let me give Mr. Connolly a few statistics here. Let me tell you this, and this is in the census report. It says here that although the population growth by status and districts, although the overall increase in the number of Caymanians in 2010 from 1999 is higher than those of the non-Caymanian population, The population growth by district shows that in Georgetown, the increase in Caymanians were 3,788 in almost match by the increase in non-Caymanians to 3,710. And then it goes on to say that he says, and this is the very important one. Meanwhile, he says the youngest age group of 0 to 14 years old grew at a rate lower than the average population growth. Thus, the overall share in total population slid from 19.5% in 1999 to 18.1% in 2010. This slowdown is seen across the large districts. It is only in North Side where its growth rate was 42.2%, is higher than the district growth rate of 37.1%, and in East End and the sister islands, this age group actually declined between 1999 and 2010. So does he want to limit the number of times a person can be elected in Cayman Islands when there's no growth rate?
If you wanted to be positive, why don't we consider reducing the age that you can serve as a member of the Legislative Assembly from 21 to 18, like in the UK?
Exactly, like in the UK. And
that would be a positive move, rather, opening it up to more. We keep talking about we want young people to be involved. Yeah, let them be able to elect someone who they can identify with in the legislature.
That's happened in England just a couple of weeks, days ago.
20-year-old, yeah.
20-year-old. And so to bring a stupid, that's what I have to call it, a stupid motion to the Assembly to say that that someone who's elected can only serve for 2 times or 3 times, it is really folly. It is really folly. And I really did not believe that I would hear that from someone who's a councillor in the government.
Mr.
That really bothers me.
Gotta go to a break. Folks, I want to remind you, you're listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Dorrit Connor. Guest in the studio with me, Mr. Steve McField, Mr. Christopher Saunders. 2 callers online. One has rejoined us and another one. We're going to take those calls as soon as we come back from the break. So please stay tuned. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record, where I'm your host, Dorrit Connor. My guest in the studio, Mr. Steve McField, Mr. Chris Saunders. 2 callers online. We're going to go to those callers in a minute, but we're going to give Mr. Saunders an opportunity to make some comments in relation to the proposed private members motion.
The first thing when I read the motion and heard of it, I was curious if that was something that was actually agreed in caucus and that is the government's position. But Mr. McField, I was one of them at first. I had a lot of optimism for Winston. I mean, I served with him on the immigration board, bright guy and everything else. But the motion that still leaves me a little bit unsettled and disappointing is the one where if you commit crimes in certain parts, you serve a longer sentence. And here's a Council for Education and Labor. Rather than focusing energy on opportunities for Caymanian job opportunities with the amount of people that we have that are unemployed, or even something in terms of, again, investing in our people from a knowledge-based standpoint. If I'd seen a motion like that being brought to the House, I would have been a little bit more, a little bit more happy. But instead, something to lock people up longer because they rob people on 7 Mile Beach when we know it costs $68,000 a year for a prisoner. Why not try to get that money and invest it somewhere in terms of jobs for Caymanians and education for Caymanians? But you know what? This is just one of those things you just have to shake your head and you just leave it to the electors in Georgetown to deal with come 2017.
Okay, let's go to the phone lines. Caller, good morning. Welcome back to For the Record.
Good morning again, gentlemen. Good morning. Mr. McField said a mouthful there, and Mr. Saunders also, what you said about, not focusing. You already have, nobody has had any criminal charge against them for helping some. You already have an anti-corruption law there and all sorts of restrictions on members. I don't see any sense in that. It must be left to conscience to decide whether you're trying to buy votes or whatever. And people are in need and people need help. And when our MLAs, they're elected by us. They're elected by us. That if some of the constituents who have elected them, some of the folks in that country if they need help, yes, help them. And I can't say anything at all wrong with that at all. But those motions wasted our time when much more important things should be in place. And Mr. Saunders, you're quite right. We have to focus on the future going forward. But Mr. McPhee said an important thing about us just concentrating on the money. In other words, we're focused our attention on the big boys in the financial world and the big banking and the funds, offshore funds and the hedge funds and whatever over the last 40 years or so, and forgot about the social aspect of it. Those out there who it affects by not marginalized and so forth in the much lower paying jobs. There are a lot of guys out there who are good with their hands at things, but they don't have an education. They're out of work. When I say education, I mean a career sort of education. And they're out of work, and they could be given jobs if we restricted those jobs to Caymanians only. I think it's an idea that we need to look at to do that. And I'm glad you're talking about the Marine School and all that, Mr. McPhee. I remember my father teaching navigation, late Captain Czar, Vital Hurston, Jamaica for free to people 70, 60 years ago and more, and inspecting boats for them, all wooden vessels. My father inspected for free for the government, for free. He would do it so they could be insured, and he would make sure that, because here's a shipwright, a licensed shipwright too, licensed shipwright. Gentlemen, have an excellent day. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hurston. Next caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, Mr. Connor and Mrs. McPhee and Chris.
Morning, Mr. Rob. How are you?
I'm doing good. It looked like we drop off from the boundary thing now, but anyhow, that's another time. What I would like to support, think the gentleman about the article in the newspaper about the molestation and rape of the young women, and I went to call in from time to article, both the Rooster and your show, but I just got around to it today, and I want to say that we need to do something about it, because it pains my mind and soul when I hear these statistics here, and knowing that something is seriously wrong with our society. We are a sick society. When we would look at little teenage girls, 12 and 13, as they start to blossom, that big hard ass man. Apologies, I get passionate when it comes to lust after these little babies. Instead of lifting them up as the princesses in our society. And we are sick. We need to do something. We need to put some program in place. Here we have Child's Month this way. This we should work towards to. What about you have in the olden days you talk about chivalry. Respecting women. Opening doors and whatever the other things, letting the women have first place. I remember hearing stories about when the ladies would go down to the post office. We had to go in at night sometimes to get a little mail, and the men that was there waiting on mail, if a woman come in, they would step aside and she would go first. Today is not so. We want to just, take advantage of the women, and also, it also pains me when I hear of all this abuse of women. This is something we need to do something about it. Our society cannot go on, and we talk and a lot of the programs are there, but we are not developing a social program to address these issues. What's happening? See, we are undermining our social trust, which one of these days will cause our financial sector to run from here, because there are no more social trust here.
And the courts, we need the courts to be much more firmer in terms of their sentencing when it comes to to those abuses as well.
There will be no biases. I remember, and I stand to be corrected, as far as I remember, some years ago, and this is still on my mind. A teenage boy raped a little smaller boy, I don't know, 5 or 6 years old, and the judge of the day examined the boy and said he never was no damage, so he just gave him a light sentence. I mean, come on, man. Well, he was no psychologist to know what damage you had done, And there was other cases here that going on, and that happens, and we just cover it up. It's time we respect our women and build a good society. We need to plan for a good society, O.C. and Mr. Steve. A good society where everyone can be respected and uplifted. We can't continue this way,
Yep.
We just cannot, gentlemen. So I don't know. You got these radio stations, and we and the newspapers, but we don't seem to build on positive things, to have a good society that we can be proud of. What's happening? We undermine it. Some of the talk shows, not yours. You took over some points about there's arguments and putting down and so you can bash the other person. That's not doing our society any good, and it does undermine our society.
Yep.
We need to put together and put plans in place that will be a social to develop our social policy that be good citizens. As citizens, what it means to be a citizen of the country, law-abiding, respectful.
Well, we will certainly strive to do that here on For the Record. And if you notice that, what we talk about, we try to empower people with knowledge. That's what we want to do here, and we will continue to do that. Excellent point, and we will certainly make sure that those issues remain on the table and they continue to be discussed, Mr. Robert. Thank you very much.
And discuss the laws of the land too, because both places. Just last point, both places, both the churches are at fault because they get on this thing about grace period and not touching we are under grace and so forth. They're not touching the laws, the basic civil laws of the society or in the Christendom. And I think that's a great disservice because Christians they say by grace we're not keeping the laws. They undermine. One person came in sometime ago in a Bible study for 15 weeks in a Bible study, came in here, then, she want to give gifts to other members of the Bible study. And she thought about a CD. And, what should do, buy a CD and then copy it and then give each member. I said, ma'am, do you realize there's a copyright? And you shouldn't be doing that. That's stealing. You just go into a Bible study and you go do that. Something is wrong,
Thanks, Mr. Robert. Thank you very much. You have a great weekend. Okay. Before we do our final wrap up, because all good things, unfortunately have to come to an end. One of our listeners wanted to know, and I got a text message last week in relation to the UK biometric residency permits and whether or not, what is required of them. Now, the UK biometric residency permits are not designed for people who have the right of abode in the UK. So, for instance, those of us who have chosen to get our British passports, we use that passport when we go into the United Kingdom. We have the right of abode. They are just like any other British citizen. So, it is not applicable to those persons who have the right of abode in the UK. So the question when you go on their website, who has to apply for a biometric residency permit? And it says foreign nationals from outside the European Economic Area making certain applications to the Home Office have to apply for a biometric residency permit. This applies to both postal applications and applications made in person known as premium application. If a migrant, and this is important, they use the word migrant, if a migrant, and so the holder of a British passport, whether you're residing inside the UK or if you're from the overseas territory, you're not a migrant, you're a British citizen. So if a migrant has to apply for a biometric residency permit, it will be stated on the application form. For up-to-date information on what types of applications are affected, you can log on to the Home Office website. But it's quite clear that if you have the right of abode in the UK, you possess a British passport, you do not need a biometric residency permit. That's like saying, I'm a Caymanian, I have a Caymanian status, I have British Overseas Territory citizen, but I need something else, for residence in the Cayman Islands. You don't need. So I just wanted to clarify that for that listener, and wrap up time for both of you gentlemen. And again, I want to say thank you for being on here again.
Thank you. Well, OC, I would like to wrap up by saying this. We in this country, OC, have to stop this financial engineering that is causing economic genocide. People cannot pay their mortgages, they're in debt, they're poor, they can't buy water, they can't buy food, and some people are sleeping outside. They have no earning power to pay their way. Negative interests and slave labor suppress growth of the poor. but the elite have their mutual funds scheme, so support their wealth. We are a people that are now look like mud. A country that cannot provide education, employment opportunity, and a healthy environment for its people is only opening the doors and the fortresses to the invader. And that invader is what one member of the Legislative Assembly said the other day: revolution. But let me say this. Revolution is not the Caymanian solution. Revolution causes destruction. What Caymanians needs is to come together again. Transcend the separation, because OC, this country is too good to lose.
Thank you very much for that. Quite insightful, Mr. Macfield. Mr. Saunders.
Mr. Macfield, thanks very much for that. That actually moved me and actually helped me with my closing remark. We actually do need a revolution of inclusion. The reality of it is this island is too divided. We have leadership that are basically polarized in this country, and a lot of the issues that need to be dealt with aren't being dealt with. The bottom line is Caymanians are hurting. People are losing their homes. Some people are prisoners in their own homes where they can't even afford to come out. This isn't what my parents and grandparents fought for and pushed for and sacrificed for. They, just like any parent, we want a better life for our children, just the same as my mother and my grandmother wanted the same for them. We need to go back to the basics. We need to remember why government was created. And when I say government, we the people. We created government to protect our life, our liberty, and our property. Right now, our liberty, our freedom is under attack. And when I say freedom, I'm not talking about growing independent. I'm talking about our economic freedom, our freedom to plan for our future, our freedom to basically live and just feel like we're alive in our own country. People are just living paycheck to paycheck, just living to paying bills, and other people are getting rich. This is unsustainable, and this can't continue. Too many people are hurting. And if people are hurting now and interest rates are at their lowest, I dread to see what's going to come next. The government needs to step in. We need to regulate fuel. People in my district that has to drive to town pay more. People in east and north side has to pay more to drive to come to town. House insurance is another issue too. That in itself is another mortgage payment. I mean, we need to step up, because unless we find a way to put money back in people's pocket and allow people to keep their hard-earned money, we're going to have this country is going to really start feeling it in the future. Anyway, I just want to close at that. Just want to wish everyone a happy Friday. I
believe you want to, Dr. Dalton.
I went to Dr. Dalton's book signing last week. This is my weekend reading. I got a preview of the book from Wednesday, and I would encourage anyone, just by flipping through it, it seems well researched, well put together, and I'm glad to see a Caymanian being able to put together something.
The title of the book?
Sports in Socio-Political Territory, Game Performances in Tourism by Dr. Dalton Watler Lyons. I encourage everyone to go. It's very inexpensive. It's only $20, but read it. I mean, when Caymanians do well, we should celebrate it.
Yes,
read it.
I agree.
And what Dalton said, after he's long and gone, this is something that his kids and grandkids and other kids can say, you know what? Our family member did this. Well, I'm proud that he did this.
Thank you.
Folks, I want to remind you that the LA, the state opening and the budget this morning, you should be seated now, 9:35 a.m. You should be seated. I'm sure if you get there a little later, you will still be seated, but you're certainly welcome to go out there and watch it live, or you can listen on Radio Cayman, and Government TV will be carrying it as well, live or replay, live also. So listen to it, read all you can about the budget, see what's in there, so that you may have questions next week that you may want to pose to our guest here on For the Record. Of course, For the Record will not be on Monday, unless I can do it from live from my bicycle. But we won't be on Monday, so we won't have anyone from government next week, because Wednesday we will have the independent member, and then Friday we'll see what happens there. But certainly I'm sure that lots of things are going to crop up, more than likely after the debate takes place, or during the debate. people will have questions and observations in relation to the budget. So please prepare yourselves for that, and we will certainly be highlighting those issues here as well. So I want to remind you that you've been listening to For the Record. I have been your host, Orrit Connor, and my guests in the studio with me this morning were Mr. Steve Macfield, Mr. Christopher Saunders, two of your favorite guests that we have on For the Record. I want to remind you that we are our brothers and our sisters keepers, and a lot that we have spoken about today relates to being our brothers and our sisters keepers. And when I talk about brothers and sisters, I'm talking from those infants all the way up to adulthood as well. There is always someone out there who's less fortunate than we are, and I ask you to extend a helping hand to them. And if you don't want to do that, then you should donate to a worthy charity. Always think about those who need, not necessarily about those who want. Have a great weekend. It's a holiday weekend. Stay safe on the roads, and rejoin us again on Wednesday when we will have the independent members. But you can also join Sterling Dwayne Ebanks today at 12 noon for talk today, but that'll be after the LA proceedings have been concluded as well. That will take place then. I think I've covered everything that we need to cover this morning, so have a great weekend. God bless.